Welcome to the Ithihasa channel. Today we follow Amba into her next life as Shikandin, born to King Drupada in the kingdom of Panchala. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Amme Narayana, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Anjanaya Namaha, Om Gurave Namaha. King Drupada of the Panchalas was a brave king. A neighboring kingdom to the Hastinapur kingdom, the Panchala kingdom was not as great as the Hastinapur kingdom, but quite powerful. In the old days, in the days gone by, Hastinapur had tried to attack the Panchalas and had been unsuccessful because of their extremely powerful ramparts and the security and the defense systems. And because of which Hastinapur could not conquer Panchala, but they reached an uneasy treaty among themselves and an uneasy agreement between themselves where they would each give the other a wide berth and not interfere in each other. And there they maintained a fairly healthy peace between the two. King Drupada was childless and he knew that he wanted an heir to continue the great kingdom of the Panchalas. So he went into the forest and decided to pray to Lord Shiva. He knew he'd be in for an intense amount of penance and sadhana, but to his surprise, Shiva came almost immediately. Well, there was a reason why Shiva came fast, because destiny had a role to play and Amba had to be reborn. And so Shiva lost no time in coming to Drupada and saying, "Tell me, O great king, what would you like?" And Drupada in his excitement said, "I want to have a child." And the great Lord Shiva said, "So be it." And then Drupada got over smart. He said, "But I want a boy, not a girl." And the word "not" is ma in Sanskrit, and sometimes when a wide wind is blowing, the ma may get drowned in the wind. And Shiva said, "So be it, you shall have a girl and a boy." And Drupada said, "So I shall have two children?" So Shiva said, "No, you'll have just the one. It will be a girl at first and it'll become a boy later." And then Drupada started protesting and saying, "No, Lord Shiva, you couldn't do this. How can this be?" And then the Lord Shiva said, "It is decreed and it shall not be otherwise," and he disappeared off. And Drupada came back home and called his favorite queen, the eldest one, not the youngest. So he called his favorite queen and called her and said, "This is what happened between me and Shiva, and we will have a child." So his queen, the favorite one, waited for her fertile time and then purified herself and came to Drupada. And soon she conceived, and Drupada was overjoyed. There were celebrations all over the Panchala kingdom that a child will finally be born to the great King Drupada. And in the course of 9 months, a beautiful girl child was born. And Drupada was happy and Drupada was thrilled, and he took this child in his arms and looked into its eyes. And there in its eyes, in its deep, dark eyes, a familiar look came at him. He couldn't remember where he had seen that look, but it was an intense look, a look that signaled there was some great destiny in that child, and an expression that haunted him for a long time. But he couldn't put his finger on where he had seen that look, where he had seen that expression. It was the expression of Amba, but Drupada couldn't figure it out. And his queen, who was also overjoyed, came and told Drupada that the prophecy of Shiva says that this is a girl child and it will later be a man. So let us tell everyone this is a boy child that we have got. Let us hide the fact that this child is a girl. We shall dress this child like a boy, like a male child. We shall ensure that everybody thinks it's a male child. Eventually it will be male. The words of Shiva never go wrong. So let us do that. And so, heeding to his wife's advice, Drupada said yes, and they brought up this child as a male child. They call this child Shikandin. This child, though female, had an exceptional attraction to the art of war. This child would always want to go to the armory and stare at the weapons and try to hold them, which was convenient because since Drupada and his wife decided to bring this child up as a male child, it was absolutely convenient that this child wanted to do everything that a male child would. Of course, they taught this child the arts of dancing, singing, which of course was very essential for even male children at the time. For the art of dancing would bring about footwork and coordination which were needed in war, and stealth and the ability to run fast which were needed in war. And the and the ability to sing and modulate the voice would be necessary for telling secrets and for shouting at large armies during the war in the middle of the battlefield. And so this child, Shikandin, which was a female child, was brought up as a male child and would be taught everything that would be needed for a king to rule the country. For Drupada knew that this child would eventually be a male child and would lead the country in the future, the country of Panchala, the kingdom of Panchala. This child Shikandin used to often come to the court of Drupada and watch him conduct the affairs of the court, and Drupada would proudly see this child look and learn from him. One day this child wandered around the court and came across this beautiful white marble pillar, this gorgeous garland of lotuses hanging around it. Now Drupada had barricaded that pillar so that nobody could reach it. There was a lamp kept in front and a worship would be done to this pillar at every Sandhya. And Drupada ensured that there was a guard guarding the pillar. But for some reason that day, somebody let down their guard and this child stood staring. This child, Shikandin, stood staring at that pillar with the blue lotuses as fragrant as ever with a divine scent. And immediately jumped the barricades, ran to the pillar, jumped over it and yanked the garland off the pillar and put it on herself. Too late, Drupada realized what this child had done, what this beautiful daughter of his Shikandin had done. And he immediately screamed at his courtiers to stop the child, but it was too late. And by then Shikandin had put that garland around her neck. She was but 7 years old, a wisp of a child. But the moment the garland was put around her neck, she stood still and in a daze. And a distant look came over her as the entire previous birth as Amba, of how she met Bheeshma and how she wanted Bheeshma dead. The entire life came back to her in her memory. And as Mahakal Shiva had predicted, her entire life has changed. And now the memory of her wanting to kill Bheeshma came back in her. And when Drupada ran to this little 7-year-old child of his and held her in his arms, he suddenly saw that same look that he had seen so many years back when Amba had come into his courtroom. That same look of determination, that same look of deep fire within, which he had seen in Amba. And unfortunately, he realized at that point of time that this child was no other than Amba reborn. And somewhere, Narada had come to meet Bheeshma in Hastinapur. And Narada told Bheeshma that in the court of Panchala, in the house of Drupada, was a girl child born called Shikandin. And this girl child Shikandin, who was being brought up as a male child, is Amba reborn. And it's through Narada, the divine Muni, who flits through the universes singing Narayana's praise. It is through this great Muni that who can see through time and who can see through space. It is through this Muni that Bheeshma finally came to know that Amba has been reborn, and Amba has been reborn as Shikandin, a female child. And at that point, Bheeshma knew that his death was at hand, And Bhishma realized that this is the child who is going to grow up and kill him, and an immense peace came over him. For Bhishma was getting tired of the long life of having to live through the travails of taking care of the kingdom of the Kuru kingdom, and he knew that one day he would be reunited with his Amba in the afterworld. And that brought great peace to Bhishma. From the day that Shikandin wore the garland around her neck, she refused to take it off. It became a part of her. That garland of pure blue lotuses with a divine scent, a scent that could not be seen anywhere in Bhuloka. Shikandin wore that garland around her neck for the rest of her life, till the day she downed Bhishma in the battle of Kurukshetra. And that was the day that the garland of lotuses started to wilt and wither. And Shikandin took over the training in the art of war with renewed vigor. Now she would devote her entire time in archery, swordsmanship, in using the mace, in using the spear. She became better than all her male peers and people senior to her in the art of war. It was with a single-minded determination that Shikandin finally took to learning how to fight, for she knew that that was her liberation, and she will eventually have to kill Bhishma on the battlefield, and she will have to challenge him. And every day that Drupada saw Shikandin learning to fight, he was filled with dread, for he knew that his daughter or his son would one day challenge the Kuru Empire, would one day challenge the Hastinapur kingdom, and invite Bhishma to a duel or a war, and that might be the end or the beginning of the end of the Panchalas. And Drupada feared the day Shikandin would take on Bhishma. Little did he know that Shikandin might be successful one day, but his dear Shikandin, he knew, may not be a match for the brave, valiant Bhishma. One day, puberty hit Shikandin, and she began flowering into a beautiful woman. And Drupada and his wife realized that there was no hiding this from the world now. There was no way they're going to hide the fact that Shikandin was a beautiful woman. And they decided it was time to get her married. But that would bring in a whole host of problems. For how would Shikandin, a woman, marry another woman? And so Drupada's wife again came to the rescue and said that we should find a girl who has not yet reached puberty, a young girl. And we could use the excuse that she has not yet reached puberty to keep her away from Shikandin. And so they searched for a girl of noble birth, and they found one such girl in the kingdom of the Dasarnakas, far out along the outer edges of Bharatvarsha. It suited them that this girl was from the Dasarnakas, which was in the outer edges of Bharatvarsha, because the distance would not allow the king there to realize what had happened. And so they invited Hiranyavarman, the king of the Dasarnakas, with a proposal for his daughter to marry the son Shikandin, the son of Drupada. And Hiranyavarman was a great warrior. The Dasarnakas were a huge, powerful kingdom. And Hiranyavarman was gifted with a mail of golden armor, which made him impervious to any arrow or any astra or any weapon. And seeing that the proposal came from the kingdom of Hastinapur, he definitely wanted it. But he sent word that since his daughter was still very young and still not attained puberty, it would do well to wait till she attained puberty at least. But King Drupada and his wife sent word that, do not worry about it. We will keep her safe and sound with the queen and ensure that she will not come in contact with the son Shikandin, and she will be preserved till the time she attains puberty, and let them not worry about it. And getting this assurance from Drupada, Hiranyavarman decided that it was a great match for his daughter, and with all pomp and fervor, his daughter was brought to Panchala, where the the great marriage between Shikandin, the son or the daughter, the son of Drupada, and the daughter of Hiranyavarman took place. Hiranyavarman bestowed innumerable gifts to the king of Panchala, for he was happy with this match and happy with this marriage. And in time, Hiranyavarman returned back to his empire. Eventually, Shikandin's wife attained puberty, and she had a great urge to meet her husband Shikandin. So, stealing away from everybody, she ran into Shikandin's room, and she was quite surprised to see that Shikandin was a woman just like her. This girl was still young and still innocent, and she came giggling back to her maids and said, "Do you know what? My husband Shikandin is a woman just like me." That was a joke for her. But the maids who had come with her from her hometown in the Dasarnakas were aghast. They secretly sent word to Hiranyavarman that this man who was married to Hiranyavarman's daughter was actually a woman, that Shikandin was actually a woman, and that Hiranyavarman was made a fool of. Enraged at this deception, Hiranyavarman sent his trusted Brahmana as a Duta, as a messenger to Panchala. This Duta came and announced in open court, "O great King Drupada, has success and pride gone to your head that you tried to fool my king Hiranyavarman? How foolish could you be? How vile could you be?" Such strong languages were used. How foolish could you be? How vile could you be that you could fool him into thinking that you could marry his daughter off to what you claimed was your son? Your son is no man, it's a woman. Who you claim as Shikandin to be your son is a woman. And why have you kept him hidden away since the last few years? Nobody has seen him or seen her. How can you fool all of us? This is an insult, and the great Hiranyavarman and the entire Dasarnaka army is right now, as I speak, marching to Panchala to lay siege and to kill you and your courtiers and your advisors. We will bind you and drag you down the streets of Panchala and have you killed. Drupada was flabbergasted. He was anxious and he was nervous and he was in turmoil. Drupada was a brave king. He was a man with broad shoulders and long arms, well suited for archery, for if you have to pull your bow and the string of the bow to such an extent as to release the arrow with such speed, you needed broad shoulders and long arms, and he was one with such broad shoulders and long arms and huge arms like tree trunks. And he was a brave king who had fought numerous wars and won. But today he was scared. He was absolutely trembling. Trembling not out of fear, but out of the shame that would follow when it would be known that his son, the heir to the Panchala Empire, Shikandin, was actually a woman. And it was insulted in open court. And this insinuation that his son was actually a woman in open court caused rumors to spread around the entire Panchala kingdom that had Drupada given birth to a daughter? Had he fooled Hiranyavarman into thinking that his daughter was actually a man? He immediately rushed to his wife to confer with her. And in his state of confusion, he couldn't think straight. But his wife, cool and calm as ever, told him, "Don't worry. Go to open court tomorrow. Call me onto the open court and accuse me of lying to you. Accuse me of fooling you into believing that your firstborn was a male and not a female, and I will take the entire blame for it. I will take the blame for fooling you, and I will claim in open court that I had kept you in the dark, that you had no clue and you had no information, you did not have any idea that your firstborn was a woman. And I will take all the blame and save you your face. You won't have to lose face in court." And so the next day, Drupada in the court of Panchala called his wife and summoned her and asked in a stern voice, "Did you know that our firstborn child was a woman? Why did you tell me otherwise?" And pretending to be shocked, His wife, his eldest and favorite wife, agreed in open court that she had fooled him all along and that she badly wanted a boy and she wanted a male child. But because she felt and she feared he would be angry with her and she would be less of his favorite, she lied to him that the first child was male. And she lied to him that by dressing the child up as a male, she tried to fool everyone in the Panchala kingdom that the first child of the great Drupada was actually a woman, was actually a female child. And Drupada feigned anger and started cursing her and saying that this entire problem is because of you. And it is you who have fooled me and fooled the entire public of Panchala. And with that, he tried to save face. Meanwhile, Hiranyavarman with his large Dasanaka army had started to lay siege on Panchala. But Drupada's wife noted that Drupada was still totally trembling and confused. He was not able to respond to the threat of the Dasanakas that was looming near. And his wife immediately took charge. She summoned the rishis in the court and the commanders of the court. To the rishis, she said, "It is essential that we please the gods and we please Shiva and we please Kartikeya. For their blessings and their force and their energy will save us and will help us bear the brunt of the Dasanaka army, to protect the ramparts and to ensure that we are safe and sound. But just spiritual pursuits is not going to save the Panchala kingdom. It would be necessary to also fortify ourselves. And so she ordered the commanders to immediately cancel the leave of all the soldiers, to ensure that all the great warriors of the Panchala kingdom with the knowledge of the Astras were summoned to the court, and to ensure that the ramparts would be fortified and the walls of the kingdom would be fortified, so the Dasanaka army would be kept at bay. And this strong woman, probably that is why she was his favorite wife. And this strong woman started to oversee the entire system of arrangements that would be made, both spiritual and on the strategic front. She was a brilliant strategist, and she would sit with the commanders and ensure that all care was taken to ensure the protection of the Panchala kingdom. Drupada was equally capable, but this whole episode had left him in tatters. In the meantime, Shikandin saw the trouble that the country was going through, her country, her beloved Panchala, was going through, with the threat of the Dasarnakas. Though she had that ambition to kill Bheeshma, she realized that her parents would be killed by the Dasarnaka army because Hiranyavarman was no mean fighter. He had the mail of gold, which made him impervious to weapons. And she felt that eventually Panchala would fall, for the Dasarnakas were violent, vicious fighters. And she knew that the kingdom would finally one day fall. Her father and mother would be dragged out onto the streets of Kampila and killed. The courtiers, the advisors, the rishis and munis of the kingdom would be killed. And as the Dasarnaka army reached near, Hiranyavarman sent another Duta into the kingdom and the Duta again started cursing Drupada, started abusing Drupada and telling him that he shall suffer for the way he has deceived, for this extreme act of deception against Hiranyavarman. And sensing danger, Shikandin ran away from the palace in the dead of the night. She ran away to a local forest. There in that forest, there lived a Yaksha of the most horrendous disposition. This Yaksha would kill anyone who entered the forest and would maul and leave the tattered bodies behind. The Yaksha lived in a castle in the forest, which had a sense of gloom around it. Skeletons were sprayed all over the courtyard of this palace and in the surrounding areas. Skeletons of people who had dared to come near this palace of the Yaksha. There was a bad stench that emanated from around this area and a sense of gloom. It was darkness all round, and the palace walls were decrepit and fading and peeling and crumbling. And Shikandin knew that if she goes to this Yaksha's palace, this Yaksha will devour her in an instant and finish off Shikandin such that Shikandin can then save her parents' lives in her death. And so Shikandin went into this Yaksha's palace, sneaked in somehow, and sat in the open courtyard, cross-legged in lotus position in penance, waiting for the Yaksha to come back, devour her, and let it be known that Shikandin, the daughter of King Drupada, is finally dead. Maybe that way Hiranyavarman would leave the kingdom of Drupada and take his daughter back and leave her parents and let them survive. And duly the Yaksha came from his pursuits outside. This Yaksha, called Sthunakarna, saw this calm, peaceful young girl sitting in the courtyard, knowing fully well that this is the house of the Yaksha, but in complete peace. He had never seen this kind of peace in anybody, for whenever they would come in front of the Yaksha, the fear in their eyes would be remarkable, and that fear would be what would make Sthunakarna kill them. But seeing this peaceful face of Shikandin, we woke Shikandin up from the penance and asked, "What are you doing here?" And Shikandin recounted the events that were happening in the palace and how she would be the cause for the end of the Panchala kingdom. And seeing this beautiful, peaceful face of Shikandin, Sthunakarna's heart melted. Sthunakarna told Shikandin, "I am a Yaksha. We've been there from time immemorial, and we are gifted with immense powers. Let me do one favor for you. I will give you my manhood and take your womanhood temporarily. Go back to your kingdom. Show off your manhood both to Hiranyavarman and his daughter. Please them and have a child. And once you've had that, come back to this forest and we shall exchange our genders back. Give me my manhood back to me at that time." And so, with these words, Shikandin was overjoyed. She realized that destiny, which was to play a part, was finally doing so. And the Yaksha then, in a remarkable feat, probably quite like the gender assignment, reassignment surgeries we have these days, in a remarkable feat, exchanged his manhood for Shikandin's womanhood. And his manhood came into Shikandin, and Shikandin's woman came into the Yaksha, Sthunakarna. And suddenly Shikandin's shoulders started becoming broader. Shikandin's bones started increasing in girth. Shikandin started developing hair, facial hair, and hair on the chest and hair on various parts of the body. And a manhood that was remarkable. Probably some form of hormonal therapy also being given at that time. And rejoicing, Shikandin rushed back to the palace and came into open court in the Panchala kingdom and said, "Father, I am not a woman, I am a man. What are we fretting about? What are we worrying about? Why do we have to fear my father-in-law Hiranyavarman?" And in open court, Shikandin took off his upper clothes and bared his broad white chest. And seeing this remarkable figure of a man in front of them, the courtiers were stunned. They were wondering, why did this problem start off in the same place? Why didn't Shikandin come out and reveal that he was a man and not a woman? And there was no doubt, looking at Shikandin's enormous body and powerful limbs, that this is a man standing in front of them. Drupada was overjoyed, and his wife too. They realized the blessing of Shiva had finally taken effect. They didn't know how, but they knew that Shiva's words would never go wrong, and it had finally taken effect. And seeing this, Drupada sent a messenger to Hiranyavarman saying, "There is some confusion and there is some error in what you've been told. My son is a son and a man of magnificent proportions. Come and see for yourself." But Hiranyavarman realized that it must be Drupada trying to delay the inevitable assault on Panchala. But he gave Drupada the benefit of doubt, and he sent 3 chaste virgins to the palace to examine Shikandin properly and to see that if he was genuinely a man and a man who could bear children. And these chaste virgins were impressed by the manhood of Shikandin and went immediately to Hiranyavarman and gave him the good news. And then Drupada said that somebody has lied to you and you've been deceived by Hiranyavarman, not by me, by somebody on your side. And Hiranyavarman was absolutely embarrassed. He came into the palace and begged Drupada for mercy. He rebuked his daughter for creating this confusion and told her that these things should not be taken as a joke and should not be taken lightly, for hundreds and thousands would die at the basis of such a joke. And in his embarrassment, he showered Drupada with innumerable gifts. Drupada too pretended that it was Hiranyavarman's fault all along, but he was a benevolent father of the groom who accepted Hiranyavarman's apologies and allowed Hiranyavarman to stay in his palace for a week. And finally, an embarrassed Hiranyavarman made his way back to his Dasarnaka kingdom. In the meantime, in these days when Hiranyavarman was staying in the Panchala kingdom, Sthunakarna was a woman Yaksha in the forest. And one day, Kubera, the king of the Yakshas, were passing by in his Vimana over the palace of Sthunakarna. Looking down at the palace of Sthunakarna, he noticed huge changes in the palace. That gloomy place had suddenly lit up. The walls bore bright colors. There were lights everywhere and a perfume emanated from the palace. It was clean all round, and the surrounding forests were absolutely fragrant with beautiful flowers and the trees shining bright. And surprised, Kubera landed his Vimana in front of the palace and came out of his Vimana. Kubera was a slightly deformed person with 3 limbs and a mongoose around him. And borne on the backs of men, he waited at the gates of Sthunakarna's castle to be invited in and to be given the respect that was due to him, the king of the Yakshas. But nobody came forth. And the doors of the palace were rattled, and yet nobody came forth. Enraged, Kubera couldn't bear that Sthunakarna had insulted him by not coming out to greet him. And he called on Sthunakarna and said, "I will curse you if you don't come out at this very instant," and sent his Yaksha assistants in to confront Sthunakarna. And they came out embarrassed and said, "Sthunakarna is now a woman, and that's why she is scared to come out and confront you, for she is ashamed." And Kubera couldn't believe. He ordered the gates to be broken down and stormed the palace and confronted Sthunakarna and asked, "What has happened to you, Sthunakarna? How are you a woman?" And Sthunakarna told Kubera the story of how he exchanged his gender with Shikandin, a prince of the Panchala kingdom. And this enraged Kubera even more, for he said, "We Yakshas are great beings. We live forever. How could you give your manhood to a mortal human being? For this I curse you, that for the rest of the days to come, which is for the rest of time immemorial, you will remain a woman and you will not get back your manhood." Sthunakarna broke down in front of Kubera and begged for mercy, and so did the other Yakshas. And finally Kubera relented and changed the curse and diluted the curse, as often happens. The curse is given in extreme temper, and when the temper subsides, the person who gives the curse cools down and dilutes it. They cannot take it back, they just can dilute it. And then he tells Sthunakarna, "Okay, I shall reduce the curse a little. You shall remain a woman for as long as Shikandin lives. And the day Shikandin dies, you shall get your manhood back from him." And this pleased Sthunakarna to a certain extent, because a mortal life is not as long as a life as the Yakshas who are immortal. And presently, when the problem in Panchala had passed over and Hiranyavarman had gone back to the Dasanaka kingdom, Shikandin, as promised, true to his word, came back to Sthunakarna and said, I've come back to give your manhood back to you and take back my womanhood. The problem has passed and I don't need the manhood anymore. But Sthunakarna gave the sad news, sad for Sthunakarna, happy news for Shikandin to Shikandin, and told him how Kubera had come and cursed him and that he would remain a woman for till the end of Shikandin's life. And so destiny played out to ensure that Shikandin would be a man henceforth and be a Maharathi who would command the Kashi forces along with his brother. We shall come to Drishtadyumna later, along with his brother, to take on the Kaurava army in the great Kurukshetra war. And so the words of Shiva would never go vain. And this is how Amba became Shikandin. And the truth of this matter only lay with the great Bheeshma, told to him partly by Vedavyasa Krishna Dvaipayana and partly by the great Muni Narada himself. And Krishna knew and Bheeshma knew that Shikandin, who would be a great Maharathi, was once a woman. And at the Kurukshetra war, he refused to fight against Shikandin. At the start of the war, he declared that he would fight every man in the battlefield except one. That would be Shikandin, for he knew Shikandin was a woman by birth. And he would not demean himself by fighting a woman. But that was the official explanation. He knew Shikandin was Amba. And he knew his death would be at Amba's hands. And he knew that if he fought Shikandin, he might kill Shikandin. And he did not want that. He wanted the death to be at Amba's hands. For when those arrows pierced him, he touched them and he said, these are Amba's arrows. These are my Amba's arrows. And every arrow that Amba sent, it hardly broke skin, but it pained him the deepest. Those are the deepest cuts on Bheeshma. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Nagendraya Namaha. Om Amme Narayana. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ganeshaya Nama. Om Anjanaya Nama. Om Gurave Nama.